Too many alerts and not enough action? It's time to get SaltStack. SaltStack is an intelligent IT automation platform that detects security issues in critical business systems and then actually fixes them. With SaltStack, security and IT teams work together to define custom security policies with certified checks for CIS, DISA-STIGs, and more. You can scan systems for millions of compliance checks in minutes. Remediate compliance and vulnerability issues with powerful automation, all in a single platform. Visit securityweekly.com/SaltStack to learn more.
Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. I'm your host, Mike Shima, joined by Matt Alderman and John Kinsella. You can now submit your suggestions for guests in our recently released guest suggestion form. Go to securityweekly.com/guests and enter your suggestions. We've heard from our listeners that they love our content, but the amount of content we distribute can sometimes be overwhelming. We've recently released our customizable listener interest list. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the listener list and let us know your interests. Okay, Matt, John, I hope you have your bingo cards out because I got two things that are familiar and then a bunch of things that aren't. So, first of all, fingerprints are back. There was a Nokia had a software update that now lets anyone bypass the fingerprint scanner with a stick of gum. So
wait, so can I ask the first question? I didn't know Nokia was still in the phone business.
Well, that's sort of like the special asterisk here, I suppose, too, right? But yeah, it was apparently the fingerprint
anybody
scanner was already
actually own a Nokia 9? Sorry.
One of my buddies is very nostalgic for him, so it wouldn't surprise me if he had them. But he still always talks about his old candy bar one. But yeah, someone out there has them.
Well, we've got some more nostalgia phones coming up in a second. But the other thing that I have to get out real quick for our bingo cards is I did find another path traversal. So this was from Doyensec. Small consulting group. They found a path traversal in the zip, basically a Ruby gem that handles zip files. And they've got a great write-up on their blog. And what kind of it stood out to me, obviously, because I needed to throw some path traversal in there, but it was also neat in terms of attack scenarios. Metasploit itself would potentially be exploitable via this type of, if it was using this gem or that it uses this gem. So it sort of goes into a theme we talked about an episode or two ago, sort of that hack the hackers or expanding your threat model beyond just what you might think of as a normal web app and how different security tools can be attacked as well.
So could you actually get Metasploit to exploit itself?
That, yes, it's a whole singularity of Ruby Metasploit exploitation. So basically, so now we have potentially everyone who has a Metasploit listener out there and waiting for reverse shells, they can now reverse the reverse shells, essentially.
Interesting.
Which sounds kind of fun.
I wonder if anyone's doing that in Honeypot. That could be interesting.
Yeah, probably. There's also some more... So talking about credentials, so Nest was in the news. So the Washington Post wrote this up about basically some weaknesses in the credentials, or at least enabling users to have the lowest common denominator of credentials to their IoT systems. So essentially saying not really setting up a basic authenticator for multi-factor authentication, and they weren't deploying like a ReCAPTCHA to prevent or to mitigate basically brute forcing or credential stuffing attacks against their login endpoints.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of these hijacks in these types of IoT devices, right, where the authentication parameters are either weak or default username passwords are being hacked. But the line in this article, if you're a home listener, this is why I don't have these devices in my house, right? They talk about what Silicon Valley calls friction. Anything that can slow down or stand in the way of someone using a product. They consider this a good thing. As security professionals, we're like, no, no, that's a really bad idea. But that's the difference between the consumer side of the house and what we think about as security practitioners, which is why I don't have a lot of this stuff in my house.
I'm always really concerned around that focus around usability versus security. So I think you're onto something there, Matt. But at the same time, it has to be, these are sort of standards in what we've got today. Usability is an issue. I'm sure the first time someone came out and said, maybe not a CAPTCHA, but a two-factor auth, say about 10 years ago, and said, we need you to, read this number off this SMS on your candy bar Nokia, which you just got. That was probably a lot of friction back then, right? But now it's it's something we expect, and it's pretty commonplace nowadays. And I think also something that's really important about this, Nest isn't a startup. This is Google. So I have just a tiny bit higher level of expectations from what they should be doing around this type of stuff.
Even use Google Authenticator. Use one of your own other products to actually make the authentication process for your Nest devices more secure. You can use your own Google Authenticator.
Yeah, exactly. That's because it's so right to call out that maybe we shouldn't get rid of all the friction, but in a way, we are getting better to solving and improving this whole user experience around this. I mean, look at Duo. Here is an awesome company that figured out how to make, multi-factor work nicely, and like customers who've never heard of Duo, like they come or never heard of two-factor, they're like, we love Duo. Like this just makes things easy, and it unlocks this whole aspect of Beyond Core, Zero Trust, all these things. So it's not like we don't, as an industry know how to. It's not like we lack the knowledge of doing authentication well.
Yeah, and I think the technologies are out there now that we can actually make this easier, reducing that friction, which I get. But as developers, we can improve the user experience and making it easier. We also improve the security of these devices, which helps with reputational damage in the case of Nest here.
Yeah, and I think there's another article I picked out along these lines and along that idea of there's a lot of things that we like security industry is like, oh, we need more friction because it'll be more secure, but there's some of it that just doesn't make sense. So Microsoft has announced with Windows 10, they're going to drop password expiration policies. And I personally think this is awesome. And
Woo-hoo!
one of my, yes, I'm going to reveal myself as a geek standard or a standard geek, I suppose. I've read the NIST SP 863. It came out a few years ago. And one of the things it says was, stop bothering with password expirations. It's actually not securing anything, and it's just driving bad behavior, and it's annoying users. So why should we even be bothering to do this?
Yep, we've been talking about this one for a while. We actually covered part of this last week on Paul Security Weekly on Thursday night. It got a little sideways on us, but I agree, right? We are encouraging weak passwords because we want to go password 1, password 2, password 3 because they have to change them every 60 days instead of coming up with a nice, long, and strong password that doesn't have to rotate. So I don't have to keep remembering that all the iterations of it is actually more secure.
Yeah. So use that multi-factor, use that password manager, and then let's actually move on with our lives and go do things that are interesting and like let our IoT devices listen to us and who knows, play music or do other things. Unfortunately, on the side of credentials and in a bad sense of timing with DockerCon was Docker had a breach notification about credentials with Docker Hub. Now, it's not a sky is falling because it was about 5% of accounts were compromised here. And there were two things I actually wanted to call this out in the sense of very positive aspects, because one, it was they also highlighted if you're exposed here, don't just rotate your passwords, also rotate your authentication token or your access tokens, because that's another thing that just losing your password isn't in this day and age isn't always the only way into your account or how your account is connected in this world of OAuth, which is still a good thing. And just in general, their breach page, it has a really nice fact about what happened, what went wrong. So I would kind of point to it as a model of how to handle communication of a breach, unlike the story we talked about last week.
Yeah, I think something similar happened last year, right around DockerCon, John, if I recall, where they didn't handle it quite so gracefully. So maybe they've learned from aspects of that and tried to get ahead of this one before DockerCon this year.
Yeah, it was actually there was a vulnerability came out the year before, and it took them months to patch it. So yeah, no, this is great job all around. I mean, the only two negatives here, and one is just unfortunate the week before their con, but the second it came out on a Friday night. It's probably the last thing I checked my email on Friday before popping a beer, right? And but at the same time, they didn't wait till Monday. They sent it out on Friday night when they found out about it on Thursday. So let's see a whole bunch of really interesting things around this. We're just talking about credentials and expiration. And, really what the more important thing there I was going to say is it's not so much, the complexity of your password or how often you change it. From an operational point of view, you want to know as soon as humanly possible that your account was compromised, right? So that's when you care about where else is that password being used? How complex was it? What can they do with that password? So now let's look at what happened here. And if you go into, say, for example, your GitHub account, I think I posted an image of part of this on Twitter. You're able to actually see when Docker revoked the token or revoked their access to that token on Thursday. So not alone they found it, they heard about it, they responded quickly, but due to the way also GitHub in that particular case, I haven't looked at Bitbucket, I wasn't linked over there. But anyways, GitHub is exposing enough of the sort of an audit trail behind what's going on that you're able to see both when your account's being used and when a third-party vendor says we ain't be wanting to be touching that no more. So I think that's sort of great. And yeah, it's this stuff is always going to happen. We're never going to be secure. Another comment before we were sort of ranting on Nest and Google. I get it. This stuff's hard. We're all going to make mistakes. I never want to stand here and say I'm perfect. I can have all the books I want in the world behind me, and I'm still going to make stupid mistakes. And so, hey, kudos on them. Hopefully I'll get to buy them a beer this week. They did a great job, and they responded quickly.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So let's go back in phone history with Matt and see. Matt, have you ever had a Nexus 5X?
Nope, not one of those either.
Nope, not one of those either. It's also about, I think, 2 or 3 years old. But what was kind of cool, there is a NCC group posted a white paper about some hacking they did against basically the trusted execution environment. That's on ARM chips that specifically was used by Qualcomm. Now, this builds on work that they had done and some GitHub code they had pushed out last year. But it was really neat because for the technical folks in our audience, if you want to read about side channel attacks, it's a really approachable paper that talks about how to pull out 3 to 4 bits of information that was of computation that's happening in this trusted execution environment. And those 3 or 4 bits are essentially enough to give hints into the nonce that is used for EAC DSA encryption, managing keys with this device. So it's a really cool way of saying we have modern CPU architectures that have ostensibly areas that are supposed to be cordoned off in their microarchitecture from other unsafe code, or they're supposed to be able to do a very constrained set of activity that is security sensitive, but we can kind of peek around of what else is going on in the chip, how it's handling cache information. And based on whether it's hitting this cache or it's pulling data out of a cache, a observer can watch that cache and say, aha, here's someone who's pulling an index out of a certain array, or they're doing a multiplication instead of an addition, or they're doing another addition instead of a multiplication. And all these really small side channels build into being able to extract a key from the device, which is really cool.
So I went to the bottom, which I thought was interesting, because it says Android developers who use the key store in their application can also take advantage of the user authentication requirements and key attestation offered by the key store, which means to mitigate this attack, it's all about user authentication and appropriate key stores again.
Yes, it very much is. And there's a couple ways to mitigate this as well. So even iPhone, for example, went down the route of system on a chip. So rather than even commingling these execution environments on the same CPU, they put it off elsewhere and say, we don't even think that that the code that's going to be running on here can be fully protected against leaking information. So that's the route they went. Um, and even, Google's Pixel XL, it does a bunch of stuff to that also mitigates this because it can mask how basically the branches that the code is taking. So, if-then statements at a more abstract level. So that it's not like the sky is falling here, but it was more of an interesting way of the actual engineering and reading through different ways that timing can be used. And that also was topical or on my mind because Google, some Chrome developers wrote a great blog post on v8.dev about the work they had done around Spectre. So for those of you, I don't know that Spectre was needs to go on our bingo card, but it was one of those things that maybe it was a sky is falling, maybe not, just depending on your threat model. But it was one of an aspect of here is a fundamental design flaw of not only CPU chips, but how the computer science and engineers were thinking we should optimize and build CPUs, meaning that there was this trade-off or call back to that friction to say CPUs really want to optimize data flows. Security wants to make sure we have strict controls and boundaries about what can be seen. So this, not to rehash all of Spectre, but the blog post is a great discussion of Spectre, has a white paper that goes into it. But what was really cool is here's some countermeasures to actually write code within the V8 engine. So inside Chrome, which, running on tons of browsers, so it's kind of important to be able to improve the security around that so it's not leaking sensitive information across origins. And they came up with one really cool thing called a poison variable that they just set this poison integer essentially before a branch, before an if condition, and then they just did some very simple math after that condition to basically trick the CPU into avoiding caching any type of speculative result. And the other aspect here that I thought was interesting, and then I'll stop my filibuster, is that they actually had to do this optimization, and they actually had to then also go into the V8 engine and make sure that the compiler didn't go ahead and throw away that optimizer. Because that's one of the other big trade-offs is that we can write secure code and try to zero out memory. But once we try to do that, a compiler optimization might go in and pull out a bunch of these assumptions that we thought was in there.
I'm no big lover of JavaScript. I think it has its uses. I think it's great for probably a learning language in some ways, since you get to actually see things change as you do it. But I think what's actually really interesting about this to me is, when Spectre came out, everyone's like, "Oh my God, we're never going to be able to fix this. It's a hardware problem. We can't fix it on an operating system level, maybe at a compiler level." All these sort of no's. But the guys over with V8, they actually took a step back and thought and head scratched, and don't know how long it took them, but they actually came out with a solution that from one of the more nefarious ways of attacking this through a browser or through something like that, right? So good on them. I think it's really neat to see that they were able to come up with something like this. And yeah, it's a really great paper.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to just here's an engineering challenge. Let's tackle it. And obviously, they even say there's more work to be done, and this is, I think more of a stopgap rather than a long term. But it's also, if everyone's moving to the cloud, Spectre is not actually the first. It shouldn't probably be the top thing on your threat model. More important is actually talking to someone like Larry and figuring out how can you actually turn a team into a DevOps team or a DevSecOps team and deal with those basics of asset inventory, app inventory, key management. That's a really big thing that we just kind of glossed over in that interview discussion. But there's a lot of really important nuances to getting it right. But if you do, you can unlock a lot of great aspect empowerment for development teams to be like, oh, we were supposed to encrypt things, we're supposed to use that strong identity and mutual authentication. Wow, it's suddenly become relatively easy, including that whole aspect of key rotation. And Matt, I think this ties into some of the articles you were looking at around just, what are the challenges into going into DevOps or DevSecOps, and what are some of the things just to be aware of in general? And I don't think Spectre needs to make the list quite yet.
No, I mean, this article, a CTO's opinion, 5 key steps for shifting security left, very, very much in line with our previous conversation with Larry, talks about some of these key things as you think about DevOps and security, and what are some of the things that you need to do. And I think a lot of this we just reviewed with Larry on the previous segment, but a great reference article to complement Larry's interview, which is, look, automation in security is critical. The ability to integrate automation into DevOps, which is all about automation and moving code into production faster, even potentially spinning up those environments. Security has to go there as well if it's going to be effective in this whole DevSecOps purview of where we think the industry is going. But then it talks about, integrate as you code, right? Which is this whole concept of, and Larry talked about it in our previous session, is, he starts with IAST and software composition analysis, things that are done as you code. So as you do a pull request, it's actually doing some of these security checks as in parallel to your overall process. And so that it is really fully integrated as you're actually walking through the entire CI/CD pipeline. Those were the first two right away that were just key to what Larry was talking about in the last segment.
Yeah, I think for me, even just on that vein, having good a linter for the code and your source code analysis, even if it's just a simple grep to look for very common anti-patterns or common smells, in my mind, that's almost sufficient for the source code scanning, because everything else kind of falls into place or addresses different aspects in the sense of, here's the peer review, here's getting the +1 on your code commits. And that article also called out 2 other areas that are non-technical in the sense of building a security champions program and having visibility into what developers are doing, as well as what application security should mean for them. And that security champions program really resonates with me because a lot of it's the idea that, in my mind, AppSec is the responsibility now of DevOps. Like that's pretty much what we've swapped the term AppSec out and turned it into DevOps, because that's where the code is being written. That's where the code can be hardened. That's where a lot of the knowledge needs to be. And putting the DevSecOps into there and having a security champions program, or having that way of not just some vapid or kind of empty secure coding, because we've been doing secure coding for probably 20 years, if not more. Maybe we haven't been doing it quite the right way, and maybe we need to do it in a more hands-on way with the developers themselves.
Yeah, and I think this highlights a point that I can't remember if it was during the interview or right afterwards, about the developer's role in security, right? And that people who have development skills and security skills are these great potential security champions as part of DevOps and the DevSecOps movement, right? You have to understand, you have to be empathetic to the developers, but you also have to understand the security. And then how do you bring these two together realistically? And I think your security champions are going to be not only security people, but also people who have experience with development and how these two really come together.
Yeah, and if you take it to, because even the basic threat modeling questions, they're not that difficult. So if you just start with, hey, developers, what are you building? What could go wrong? And what are you doing about it? Their first instincts are to go about the bugs, API problems they ran into, trying to integrate with other services. But then just starting at a high level, say, cool, what about the confidentiality? Talk a little bit about that. Integrity, availability, just that CIA triad. is an easy departure point to sort of get those light bulbs to go off and have those relatively simple conversations that maybe can go down to that technical depth, like that V8 inspector and countermeasures for that, or they just need to be those aspects of, oh, we're building a login prompt and maybe we should have two-factor for it because it's 2019. Oh, and ReCAPTCHA, there's this company called Google that makes a ReCAPTCHA, and it's pretty easy to throw in front of a login form to mitigate brute force attacks, let alone others, companies like Cloudflare or others that have these types of solutions.
Yeah, and on the last one, which is the culture of visibility, again, we talked about some interesting pieces of visibility in the early part, more on the static side, right? The kind of the source code, the composition analysis, maybe dynamic and runtime analysis as you mature your program. But the conversation we had with Larry about Chaos Monkey and running that in production and seeing, just creating services to go down and how it makes them more resilient also applies to security, and that in understanding where potential points in your application could break or become breached is part of that kind of concept. I mean, that's really mature on the far side, the far end spectrum of doing this stuff and having that visibility in production. But there's a number of steps along the way that help improve that visibility as you mature your overall process.
Yeah, and go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, you've got me thinking about another open source project idea of a fuzzer monkey that just sits and runs in productions and just keeps sending like junk into your application and see how it deals with it. Might be a little bit harder to sell that with people to get them to actually agree to use that in prod.
Maybe.
It might be, but
it'd be interesting though.
Yeah, and we have I think mentioned a while ago, Azure has they have their fuzzer in the cloud, and so there's cloud fuzzers out there. So it'd be really interesting because going back to that Chaos Monkey, just being able to exercise those muscles of some service went down in production, let's spin it back up, let's build that feedback loop so we actually know about it more quickly. All of that translates very simply, very straightforward into the idea of a 0 day. So, if your worry as a CISO of like a 0 day could take us down, maybe you're not thinking things through right, and probably need to have that conversation of, sure, 0 days exist, but how long does it take us to deploy a patch? How long does it take us to have a feedback loop? If it's, if your CI/CD system takes 24 hours to release for whatever reason, maybe you're doing what Larry was calling that like DevSecOps in name only. If your CI/CD system can push a patch out in 5 minutes, or maybe it takes 20 minutes, but you have a fast track explicitly for emergencies, then you're probably doing the right thing.
And then having that automated fuzzer actually just injecting code in to see what happens. We're like, oh, yeah, we've got an issue in the app, then you could push out the fix really, really fast. And think about what that would do to reduce the overall attack surface in that environment.
Yeah, and if you need some help on this, John, I'll write I got my / fingers in place, so all those path reversals, I'll write that fuzzer module.
Cool. I'll take you up on that. So I know we're running out of time, but you got me thinking about something. I just want to throw a question past the two of you. We had something further down the list. I don't think we're going to talk about like, security education for programmers doing embedded and IoT, things like that. But thinking about education in this, it seems like as these two sides are getting closer and closer together, should we be looking for courses or educators or colleges or whatever to expose developers to this, to have them start thinking about in their classes of how do you do DevOps, how do you do, adding that scanner into part of your code, maybe part of one of your final projects is, does your code come out clean, or, or are you passing some of these linters without any issue? It'd be really interesting, at least from my point of view, to see that come earlier into the picture, because the way I think of it nowadays, at least in my experience, people usually don't start seeing those bits until you're out in the real world. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about that or what you've seen out there.
I'm starting to see more cybersecurity education courseware in colleges, but I think it's more traditional network endpoint security aspects. So I agree with you, John. I'd like to see adoption of that in your development courses, right? If we think about when you come out of college as a developer, you're going to probably go into an environment that is starting to, if you haven't already transformed, you will transform soon into this concept of DevOps. And if they could bring some of that education in earlier, I think that would help on the development side tremendously. But I don't think I haven't seen any programs specific on the coding side of security yet, more on the network endpoint. And that's probably 10, 15 years too late as we're starting to abstract all that stuff away.
Yeah, I think I've seen the same thing, just in that sense of some cool research in terms of reverse engineering. Especially, everyone loves playing with and taking apart mobile phones. There's a lot of analysis I've seen in that, or a lot of courses around that. I guess if I'm going to throw out a wish list, though, I would also hope that these courses start to also tackle some of the social aspects of programming, in the sense of pair programming, for one, because that's a great way for companies to build code, build that empathy within a DevSecOps team, as well as just that idea of communication, in the sense of, sure, there's code that ideally is self-documenting. I love the idea that the code itself is the document, but there's also the aspect of, what are you trying to build? What's your feature? What feature is this? And then, even tying it into that idea of threat modeling, being able to concisely talk about what are you building and what could go wrong. Those communication skills are pretty important, and being able to tie them into either that CIA triad, or be able to clearly state, this is a threat model and these are the mitigating factors. I think that's important, because it applies to just code and talking with others. And the reason I'm saying this is that no one's writing code on their own or just for themselves. These organizations, they may have small teams, but these teams are building the code. And that's, I think, one of the major aspects of DevSecOps has come out as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good point.
So let's see. We've got.
I think that was. Did we miss any? I think that was close to all of them.
No, I think we got all of them. And there was one. There was one. If we had time, I know everybody was probably spending their weekend watching HBO, and no spoilers here. But I wanted to dive back in a little bit of history, since we had a few minutes left. 33 years ago, almost to the day, there was a satellite connection hijack from Captain Midnight. And this was somebody who had access to equipment to be able to do this, but basically hijacked the satellite connection that was distributing the signal for HBO, and basically threw up for a couple minutes a complaint that you're paying too much per month for HBO. It was also sort of a very much like a Max Headroom. If we're going down memory lane and the archaeology of cyberpunk, that was kind of neat. So if those of you out there are interested in FRAC, it's a great an old online magazine, and there was an article about this in FRAC number volume 1, issue 6. So 33 years ago, a bit interesting, just since HBO was on my mind, as I think it was on everybody else's, whether or not they were avoiding spoilers or they were just haven't even seen an episode yet of that one show that shall not be named.
It was nice to see the flashback for FRAC, so thank you for that. I think a lot of us cut our teeth on that back in the day, so it's happy memories.
I think so too. So we'll try to come up. We'll make sure we have a good mix of the new and the old for you, Matt. So we can pull out those dusty dial-up modems. Maybe we can get some war dialing for something for next week. I'll find something else like that. How's that?
Yeah, that'll bring back good memories.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think we have hit our, speaking of side channels, our timing resolution for this episode.
Boo.
So, yeah, okay. We'll be back. Don't worry. Come back next week. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And in fact, it was April 29th today, but next will be May, and we'll see you next week on Application Security Weekly.